Ever since I got the Clear Creek narrow gauge route in TS Classic, I've been fascinated by the narrow gauge lines in the state of Colorado. And more recently, I discovered the Rio Grande Southern Railroad, its iconic Galloping Goose railcars, and the man who cooks food in the K-37 steam locomotive's firebox. Today, we'll be looking at the RGS as it appears in Train Simulator. This add-on was made by Milepost Simulations and released in March 2023. It costs a staggering 57 New Zealand dollars at full price, so if you want to pick up this route and try it out for yourself, I recommend waiting for a sale and buying it then. For context, the Rio Grande Southern was a 3-foot gauge railroad that ran through the rugged terrain of southwest Colorado, going from Durango at the southern end to Ridgeway at the northern end via Lizard Head Pass. A man by the name of Otto Mears was the driving force behind the line's construction, and it opened in 1891, eventually becoming a subsidiary of the Denver and Rio Grande Western. The RGS was built to transport silver from mines in Rico and Telluride, but the railroad's finances were permanently crippled in the so-called Silver Panic of 1893, and it would eventually close down in 1951. I dare say the line would have closed a lot sooner than 1951, had it not been for the custom-built railcars that I'll discuss later. Sadly, the railroad's massive Ridgeway shops do not feature in Train Simulator, as the add-on only includes the 40-mile-long section of the main line from Rico to Placerville, plus the 10-mile-long Telluride branch, which leaves the main line at Vance Junction. While it kind of sucks that we don't get the full RGS route in TS, I understand that it would have been a huge amount of extra work to add the entire line, and at least the section we do get has some of the most iconic landmarks on the route. These include Lizard Head Pass itself, the unusual snow shed at the summit, and the Ophir Loops. On the motive power scene, this route only includes the K-27 class 282 steam locomotive. A bit of an odd choice, in my opinion. The K-27 was a class of 15 engines built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1903, originally as the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad's Class 125. This was before the DNRG was reorganized into the Denver and Rio Grande Western. Locomotive number 455 was sold to the Rio Grande Southern in 1939, with 461 eventually following suit in 1950. These locomotives were nicknamed Mud Hens for some reason, and 2 of them have survived into preservation. The survivors are numbers 463 and 464. I remember that when the RGS add-on was first released, the K-27's whistle sound wasn't all that good. However, this has since been improved, but I don't remember when, or what the original whistle sounded like. In any case, I believe the actual 3D model depicts a 3-chime whistle, but I dare say someone will correct me if I'm wrong. Meanwhile, the bell sound is reused from the Colorado and Southern B4D. That's the locomotive that comes with the Clear Creek route. You can ring the bell by pressing the B key, but the audio is not realistic as it abruptly cuts out when you press B again to stop ringing, rather than the ringing slowing down until the bell stops moving. As for the chuff sounds, I'm pretty sure these are reused from the B4D as well. Aside from the whistle, the sounds on this locomotive are nothing special, in my opinion. I'm disappointed in the inclusion of only one locomotive with the RGS route, seeing as this railroad didn't just operate K27s in real life. They actually had a whole host of quirky steam locomotives in rolling stock, but the only one that comes to mind is the now preserved T19 Class 460 No. 20, based at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Only seeing the K27s in-game makes this route feel like a completely different railroad, and, come to think of it, Milepost missed a trick by not including a post-wreck variant of locomotive number 455 when she was refitted with a cab from a standard gauge locomotive. As if the inclusion of only one locomotive wasn't disappointing enough, no passenger-carrying rolling stock is included either, not even the iconic Galloping Goose railcars. Instead, you only get a selection of freight wagons and a caboose, meaning that the only way to run passenger trains on the RGS in-game is to use the Colorado and Southern coaches from Clear Creek, or any other American 3-foot gauge passenger stock that's available for the game. However, one of the geese, number 7, is available as a freeware download, but it's only that one rail car instead of all 7 geese. The model was made by, and I apologise in advance if I mispronounce the name, Bernard Deschamp, and I'll put a link to his website in the description. It's not bad for a freeware model, and I do enjoy taking this thing for a drive every now and then, but I would have a different opinion of its quality if this thing was payware. Incidentally, there's a heritage railway here in New Zealand that has 2 railcars of a similar concept to the Galloping Goose, but I believe we call them bush jiggers here. For reference, this is on the Glen Afton line, near the town of Huntly. The Galloping Geese were a very strange class of custom railcars built using parts from contemporary motor cars. They were built on the cheap between 1931 and 1936, and used by the RGS to retain a vital US mail contract. For more information on these things, I recommend watching the appropriate Big Train Tour episodes on the Colorado Railroad Museum's channel. One of the episodes is all about number 7, which was built using parts from a Pierce Arrow car. It's also worth mentioning that the RGS originally referred to these things as simply motors, with the Galloping Goose nickname not being officially recognised by the railroad until around 1950, when 4 of them were modified for tourist service. Considering the fact that we've since got at least 3 DLC packs that add extra rolling stock to Clear Creek, I'm still holding out hope that we might eventually see similar packs released for the Rio Grande Southern route. The low quality of the engines in the old Clear Creek Log and Lumber expansion pack, which was made by Romantic Railroads, is something for the developers to bear in mind. If you're going to make RGS 20, the other 6 Galloping Geese, or whatever else would also be suitable for the RGS route, they need to be high quality. Come to think of it, I wouldn't mind seeing Smokebox try his hand at making RGS 20 for TS Classic. Although it's probably not realistic in the slightest, you could run Machine Rail's HK Porter saddle tanks as shunters on the RGS, because they at least run on the same gauge as the K27. I refer to the little porters as merely shunters because A, we don't use the term switches here in New Zealand, and B, there's no way these tiny things could make it over Lizard Head Pass. The engines in this pack from Machine Rail may be weak, but at least they're quite good looking models. Much better than the Romantic Railroads version, if you ask me. My favourite aspect of the Rio Grande Southern route is actually the scenery. Milepost did a pretty good job at capturing the feel of a little railway snaking its way around and over the big mountains. And my favourite landmark is the Ophir Loop, although Trout Lake is another interesting spot on the line. Although I like the scenery as a whole, I certainly can't verify the accuracy of it all, especially when it comes to the distant scenery and the towns. Apparently, some of the house assets used in Telluride aren't accurate to this area at all, but I dare say someone will correct me if I'm wrong. It can be difficult to drive the K27 on this route, especially when she's hauling a decently long train. This is largely due to the inclines, which can get as steep as 4%, or around 1 in 25. I'm not all that familiar with percentages because I'm used to using the ratio. The experience of driving the K27 reminds me of driving the B4D on Clear Creek, only I thought that was a lot more frustrating due to how quickly the B4D lost boiler pressure. Unfortunately, the manual for the RGS add-on doesn't provide any details on the ideal fire mass and water level for the K27, so that's something you'll have to work out yourself. At the end of the day, I think Milepost Simulations did a reasonably good job on recreating the Rio Grande Southern Railroad for Train Simulator. This is one of the better American routes when it comes to scenery, and it's nice to go for a jolly jaunt along the line with the K27 or any other 3-foot gauge locomotive that can handle the grades. However, what lets this route down for me is the rolling stock selection, so adding more motive power, like the previously mentioned RGS-20, would be a good way to improve the experience on this route. As it stands now, I think it still deserves a 7.5 out of 10.